I look at how much we have changed from being a small company that just offered phone service in Walnut to having 1,600 customers and offering service in 8 communities.
It's all about helping your neighbor, really. That's what it comes down to.
That's what we're here for, is to help others.
I believe it's like 1893, I'm not quite sure the exact year. That was when the patents went off on the telephone, and that opened up pretty much anyone beyond Alexander Bell himself and his company to building telephone systems. So there was a lot of activity, small towns starting at that time. It was in all around 1900, 1901. There was a lot of interest, I believe, in the town of Walnut particularly. There were a couple companies that got franchises in the very late 1890s, 1901, 2, 3, and one that finally actually ponied up to do something was a company by the name of the Musson Brothers, 1911, 12, 13, 14. That was really a boom time for agriculture. Local farmers around here didn't feel they were served very well with the company that is currently here, so they essentially got together in 1915 to start their own company. 1915, probably into 1916, the telephone lines were just built around the farms here south of Walnut, within, say, about three or four miles of this place. My grandfather's brother, who lived where we are now, he was the president of the company and the manager of the company, and the switchboard appears to have been in his house at that time. Once they got the lines built as far as Walnut, they rented space in the bank, of course, and that's where they were headquartered from then on. That would have been probably sometime maybe later in 1916.
These old guys that started, they were so sure it would work, and it did.
So they built their own farm line and filed for license and competed for about two years or so before they bought the existing phone company out.
When they were building the lines in the town of Walnut, very unusual for that time, they buried all their cables in town. Used lead cable. To do that, they didn't have the machinery like we have now to do, so it was all dug in literally by hand. So they had hired a lot of the local farmhands, what have you, to dig trenches around town. One of the people that they had hired him, and he went down to the hardware store and bought his spade and started work, and decided really he wasn't much of a spade man, so he resigned his position after a couple hours and took his hardly used spade back to the hardware store to get a refund. And, that afternoon, my grandfather happened to be in the hardware store, and the proprietor was relating the story, and so my grandfather says, "Geez, well, that's a used spade. It ought to be half price now." So he got his bargain spade. Heard that story many, many times.
My name is Betty Griffiths, and my husband Frank worked for the telephone company 2 different times. Yeah, I was born here in 1921 and have lived here all my life.
Do you remember Walnut during the Depression?
Oh, do I? No, I know we just had a rough time. A darn rough time. But, and things were, they rationed out everything, you know. Sugar, shoes, gas, everything you think of, they rationed it.
After World War I, agriculture lost a lot of its markets in Europe, and it was a really hard time. Very depressive through the early 20s. Gradually improved towards the later 20s, and then of course the Depression hit. And that was very hard on agriculture. People weren't able to pay their loans or pay their rent.
Mom was alone, and we didn't have a lot of money because there were poor times. And when Mom could afford it, we had the phone, and when she couldn't, we had to have it disconnected.
The company had looked at people they employed. There were cuts in wages. Unfortunately, they had to cut the price of service to keep people on. They had all sorts of incentives to make sure people paid. And
I feel like I grew up in the 30s, as I said a few minutes ago. My parents did, and they just drove it into our heads. You've got to conserve everything. And that's pretty much where my mindset is.
Even so, the company was a fairly well-run company, and so it did have some cash in the bank, and that became an attractant to some of the stockholders that felt should have access to that cash. The annual meetings in 1934 and 35 were pretty acrimonious on that subject, as I remember hearing a lot about when I was young.
It was quite an experience. It was a real fun experience just to work with Norris Pilling. Everybody called him Muggins.
What did you do?
Just a helper, just go with Muggins. I climbed a lot of poles. Muggins was a big man.
Norris was a big man, big strapping man.
I mean, he was strong. He set a 25-foot pole by himself. If you just help him get it up on his shoulder, he'd set it up.
He was a lead splicing master.
Yeah.
Lead cable splicing, and he was asked from companies far and wide to come and do splicing.
The cable, it was covered with lead or solder, and he'd handle that hot lead with a pair of mitts, you know, and form that lead around that cable so it was tight.
I just always remember Frank working with Norris.
They get along real well, him and Frank.
And when he got up on a pole to tighten wires, he had told me, get down, because I couldn't pull him tight enough to see. So he'd get up on a pole and he'd make those things swing, just sing out there. He got them tight.
They had hooks that they hooked on their legs and climbed up, and then a belt, of course, that went around their waist. And that was the only. But he felt safe with the belt and the hooks that he could dig into the pole, you know, with. And, yeah. I think he done most of the climbing. I don't think Muggins did too much climbing.
It won't be long now until dial telephones are ready to serve you, so that there will be no interruption in your telephone service during the changeover. Everything is made ready. When the signal is given, the fuses are pulled out of the lines that were part of your manual equipment. At the same instant, we close the connections in the dial equipment, and dial service is born. Instead of hearing the operator's familiar "number please," you'll hear the dial tone. That means that the equipment is ready to handle your calls. Dial service, however, doesn't do away with the need for operators. You'll always find operators ready to help whenever you need them. For an emergency, information, for out-of-town calls, or for any call in which you experience difficulty.
Originally with the dial, everybody was on a 6 or 8 party line well, throughout town and the country. I didn't have enough open wire pairs to go to everybody with private lines, so I do remember my 4-digit number, 2634.
Our ring was green 17, and Frank's post number was black 123. Don't that sound funny, black 123 for number, green and blue? We was always on a party line. There's 3 or 4 people on the party line. You knew everybody's business if you picked up the phone.
But then they had the cutoff too. After 5 minutes,
Oh, yes.
they'd cut you off.
Yep.
I remember I had a couple neighbor ladies that just talked all the time. They said, "We don't know anything." Well, no, I don't either. Then the thing get cut off and they dial back. Beat me by on back.
My grandfather really didn't have a lot to do specifically with the company. It was his brother that did all the day-to-day type work. He died when I was about 4 years old, and I can remember seeing him, but I really never knew him very well. My dad took over a board position from him when he died. First real thing I can remember on the telephone company was come in here. Another great uncle of mine took over as manager at that time. I remember coming in to see him after school or when we were in town.
Aunt Mattis, he was the big manager at that time.
I'll say 1960, there were two car dealerships in town. There was a farm machinery dealership. There were 2 grocery stores, 3, 4 restaurants, like no less than 5 or 6 bars. Mid-60s, they put the interstate in. The railroad that came through town, it left in the very early 60s. There was clothing stores, and you know, you could buy anything you needed. There was a furniture store in town. By 1970, 72, just about all of them were gone. Well, throughout the 60s, but especially towards 1968, 69, they replaced all the overhead wires with buried cable in the country.
Frank Klein poles and stuff for a long time. And then he took the poles out, you know, because I was all underground cable. So he didn't have to do that anymore.
And in 1970, that job was done, and I was part of the crew that took down all the original overhead wires. By that time, I was off to college. After that, I was off to the Army. And I came back to the farm and got much more involved with the phone company when it got its first digital switch.
We were at one of Karen's aunts for Thanksgiving in 1975. I found out that they were looking for a manager at Walnut. Again, I was still not really interested. A day or 2 later, there was a knock at our door in Atlantic, and they wanted to interview me. And okay, I mean, it can't hurt. It was so foggy, I almost turned around and said, "It's a sign." I came up, went to the board meeting, and all the board asked questions. The president says, "Well, we'd kind of like to talk about you now. Maybe you'd like to leave the room." And one director says, "I think you ought to hear what we have to say about him." I said, "What? I've never been in an interview like that before." And then he says, "Besides, I move we hire him." And somebody right away, "I second the motion." We got a motion on the floor. Aye. This says, "Are you interested in taking the job?" Says, I had to make a snap decision right there. Leave the job I liked and go somewhere else. It was the right move.
He's just a good neighbor. You know, we've known him. We're in genealogy together.
The board at that time was discussing the purchase of a digital switch. The Bell system didn't have anything like that. Iowa didn't have anything like that. And here they were discussing that. That's an issue, because my experience to that point didn't include anything like that. The rural had already become single party. The town of Walnut had not. So here we're going to be delivering digital service to party lines. Kind of I don't have the correct word for that, but the two didn't match.
It brought a lot of services that people didn't have before, things like push-button dialing and the call waitings and that sort of thing. Got people used to a different level of service than what they could get other places.
I found out about 24/7 requirements as a technician, as manager both. That's part of it. You're on duty 24/7. And being the only person, not only in Walnut Telephone Company, but in the state with the education for that switch, that was kind of an awakening.
The digital switch we had was the first digital switch in Iowa, and actually one of the first that was deployed in the world. Very, very cutting edge thing at its time. We paid for it several ways.
The first digital switch in the state of Iowa that was turned up. There was another one being built, but it hadn't been turned up. Probably a handful, maybe 5 worldwide. Pretty new. I would think they should have stayed and made sure it was going to work. Not so. So here I am. Nobody could call, no neighbors to call, nobody had one. That first summer, from May, that first summer, I was downtown in the middle of the night at least 4 nights a week.
Jim was pretty heavily taxed trying to keep their digital switch going, and so I was his relief man.
He had to retire. I think the new equipment was too sophisticated for him, because it was, you know, complicated. And he got sick. And, he passed away soon after he got sick. And Frank was so upset when he died. He'd come home and he says, "Betty, we lost him." And he really was down about it, but he worked with him a good many years. He was a good friend.
That switch went in the spring of '79, and then in '82 we were doing cable TV, and we began the cellular.
Back in the 80s, got into the wireless industry before it was even a thing, and that got them very far ahead in terms of, you know, technological advancement.
We were the first company in Iowa, and again, one of the first in the nation to apply for a cell phone license for the Omaha market, which we, by dint of location, we just were inside the boundary of.
And we applied for a cell phone license in the Omaha market. This little bitty company, and people laughed at us. Well, the FCC said they will do one of two things, because a lot of the people applied. We'll draw a name out of the hat, or you'll form a partnership. So a partnership was formed.
Cell phones, have one, but I have to have the instructions taped to it because I don't use it, and you know, you forget.
We were working with cell phones long before many around.
I don't know how these people got along before without cell phones. You go to the grocery store and they're talking to one another, one in one aisle and another person in another aisle, and they're visiting back and forth on that darn phone. So
Had this first cell phone in Iowa in my car for I think it was like February of 1985 when they turned up the cell phone system in Omaha.
But we had a lot of capital calls coming, and some of the board members weren't happy with meeting those capital calls. They said, "We want a return on investment." The reason I was willing to meet them it was because there was demand for new towers and more phones, and they had to buy stuff. And so people were buying it. And so it was a good move.
When you say the word Denny Book, most people know who it is.
The nice part of my job is I get to go out and meet people, tease people, have fun with them.
Get a hold of Denny and he'll usually send someone else to take care of it himself.
Figured I was going to be a farmer. That didn't pan out.
He's just kind of a go-to guy. He knows a lot, knows the people. Been here a long time.
And I've been with him since 1982, February of 1982.
Denny fields trouble calls after hours.
Whether it's off his work hours or not, he's just really good.
In his mind, knows where everything is buried in the ground in almost every single one of our communities.
It runs up to the water tower. On the back side of the water tower, then it comes out of town. And then it heads on over through the country to Minden.
Denny is also very important to our communities. He was a longtime baseball coach. He is very involved in his local church. He is just a very good citizen, and we're lucky to have him.
Hey, I give you my phone number. You worry, call me. I make you happy.
So we had that thing, I think, 10 years, and we bought another one. Same manufacturer. Oh, the board, I didn't say this to them. Why did you do this? It was absolutely different unit. The new one, not a single line cord failed in its life. The other one, they was like popcorn. I was replacing line cards all the time, but the second one never failed. That's about all I remember about it. I had so many ill feelings from the first one that the second one was almost like vacation. Lightning strikes the tower, the surge goes through the wall into the electrical outlet, into our teletype, our interface with the switching system, and that very fine 30 gauge or finer wire, how in the world it traveled down that, into the switch, and then burns part of that out.
Then we went from the Stromberg to a Mitel, and that did a lot of neat, different little things too.
That Mitel switch, and we had less than 10 years, that was almost like dessert and vacation. It was so easy to work on, it almost never caused difficulty.
As I got older, I worked there a couple summers just to help out, and I actually helped install, I believe, the Mitel switch he was referring to.
Wonderful switch. I went to school on that in Canada for I think it was only a 2-week school. Wonderful switch, just probably my favorite.
Now that Mitel was supposed to last what, 20 to 30 years?
Yeah.
That lasted 10?
Well, it probably would have. It lasted 8. Was it only 5? But it wasn't the switch. It was the technology.
I'm Terry McCarthy. I live here in Walnut, and I work on the phone switch and the internet equipment and stuff like that in our equipment room back here. When I started with the company, we were a phone and internet and cable provider in Walnut, and that was it. And it was dial-up internet, and we had one T1 connection to Des Moines. And now we have like a 700 meg internet connection to Des Moines. So that's one of the more major changes, and Of course, we've installed a new phone switch since then.
Currently, our switch is what's known as a soft switch. We installed it in 2003. That was as an early adopter, and now that's the norm for switching. And in fact, the government's even pushing to make sure companies convert over to those.
Then we grew kind of rapidly, and we started taking on these other communities. And at the time I started, it was dial-up internet, and the internet was just taking off, and it kind of exploded. And we took on these other communities at the same time, and cable television, and wow.
Growing out to all the other communities was it's been a busy 15 years, that's for sure.
Started when he was 18 and has been in the industry ever since, and really was kind of on the leading edge of when the technologies all started to change in the mid-90s.
My name is Tanya Olson. I'm a customer service rep at Walnut Communications, and I've worked here for over 10 years.
My name is Marlene Nelson, and I'm a customer service rep.
At the time I started, we were all just located in Walnut. We hadn't even opened the Avoca office yet. We had Walnut, Avoca, Minden, and Shelby. And then over the course of the time, we purchased Underwood, Persia, and Neola, as well as went into now our fiber to the home product. So it started out as a pretty small area, and now we've grown to be a decent sized company.
I took over as manager 2009, I believe. Yeah, it's fall of 2009. No, 2008, excuse me.
I retired that year. It was probably the worst year I could choose, but that's okay.
In 2008, telephone was still a major product line. It's more of a sideline now.
When I came on, had I retired?
You had retired.
Was Lawrence Rossman's place I take, or?
Who did you take? I think Rex took Lawrence's. I think you took my dad's.
Oh, maybe.
Then it kind of stayed the same until last summer when we added Cassie and then Danny, of course.
Hi, my name is Danny Peterson, and I have served on the board for 4 months now, so I'm a newbie here.
Cassandra Heine. I'm a regulatory affairs consultant for independent rural telecommunications providers out here in DC. When I was young, I grew up in the company, and I would go there after school with my grandpa was president then, and I have a lot of really fond memories of going to the office and playing with the telephones and talking to the customers. And then when I was in high school, I worked for the company during the summers, which was awesome because I got to play around outside with cables and install phone lines and all kinds of cool stuff.
My name is Leah McCarthy, and I've been with Walnut Communications almost 6 years. I started in March of 2009 and started as their marketing and salesperson. Just this last summer of 14, we laid fiber into the ground to the Avoca school. They had surpassed all our capabilities here. So we decided to make an investment and get fiber to them and serve the school with that.
One of the biggest infrastructure upgrades that Walnut Communications did for us was investing $30,000 into our school district by upgrading their fiber optics coming into the school. Our technology within our school systems and with the support of Walnut Communications has allowed us to eliminate the barriers for our students to be a part of different cultures and a part of different diversity that they may not experience just here in Avoca and Walnut and Shelby, Hancock, and Tennant. It allows our students to have a variety of experiences nationally and globally, and without the technology in Walnut Communications, it wouldn't be possible.
Fiber really is the only technology that allows us to do that, and we're very happy to have that partnership with them. We decided to take it a little bit further, and we have continually employed kids from those schools part-time. And our hopes and dreams are to take it even further than that and get into the schools and have a program that they do continually, like a news program, and that would be aired on our local television channels. So whatever we need to do in the future, we're determined to have a good relationship with them, and whatever their needs are, we will try our best.
How has this little company been able to stick around for 100 years?
It's part of the community.
Good service.
Because of their service, because of the personnel that they do have there.
I would definitely attribute it to having foresight of, technological changes.
The customer service, the people, the friendliness of small town.
Always having cutting edge technology, I mean, that helped them stay ahead of the curve and not get bought out by a larger competitor.
Just customer service. They were customers. In the beginning, it was those same directors, for example, who were the customers. And they knew what they wanted. Treat others the way you want to be treated.
It goes from a CSR spending 45 minutes on the phone with someone explaining what email is to participating in local soup suppers.
It really means something to each of us. So, it's probably why 100 years.
They've had good managers and good leaders. They've kept it going. Now I've got Bruce in there.
My dad has always been, a very strong role model for me, and the way he's run the company has always impressed me, so.
We aren't anything without the customers, so it behooves us to take care of the customers. We take care of the customers well, they'll in turn take care of us.